Hi everyone, welcome to Documenting Our Learning. In this module, I'm hoping that you can learn a bit about what pedagogical documentation is and how you might plan for a really satisfying start to your own documentation project. If you're watching this video, you may be brand new to this work, or you may have been documenting your learning or doing that beside your own students who are documenting theirs for some time. I'm Angela Stockman, and over the last 15 years, I've been documenting my learning in very different contexts with both elementary writers, middle school writers, high school writers, students in my undergraduate courses at Damon University, and graduate students in the Department of Education there as well. I've documented my own learning for a variety of personal reasons too. And so whether you're here to focus on some more cerebral stuff this summer, to plan for a new year of teaching and learning with your students, or really to restore and rejuvenate your own energy for the work that you do each day, I'm glad that you're here. You can even use these lessons to really focus on how you might improve your own well-being, including your mental or your physical health, and not think about school at all. So welcome. I'm glad that you're a part of this work. Let's dive in. In this session, we'll define what pedagogical documentation is and distinguish it from documenting our learning in general. We're going to examine the postures documentarians move through and how they move in and out of them as well. And hopefully by the end of this session, you'll find a simple, or if you're experienced, a more sophisticated way to begin documenting your own learning. I'm Angela Stockman, the author of The Writing Teacher's Guide to Pedagogical Documentation, Rethinking How We Assess Learners and Learning. I've also written several other books on working with young writers and multiliteracy instruction specifically. It was Rebecca and a few other friends in the field who invited me to think about writing a book about how I wrote all of my other books, and that's what this one was all about. I've been documenting my learning for quite a long time, and it's the results of that that I've kind of disseminated to the field. I invite you to do the same if you're interested, and I can promise you that no matter where you are in your learning about pedagogical documentation, you're definitely ready to dive in and join us right now. This is one of the most important quotes from my own book, and I hope that as you read it, you'll get a sense of what my hopes and intentions are for our work together through these particular modules. Documentation is something that we can use in the classroom to improve our pedagogy. Pedagogical documentation is the process by which we make learning visible with students and through our own work. And we try to capture that process and the learning that has been made visible by taking pictures, by audio or video recording our conversations with students or our own reflections as well, or by making annotations or gathering artifacts along the way. The data are purely qualitative in nature, and we can use those data to study progress toward learning outcomes and in order to improve our practice. Documentation isn't just about that, though. We can document our learning in any context and for any purpose. And it's that paying attention that has really helped me sustain my energy for the work that I do, no matter what role I'm in, what position I fill, what difference I'm trying to make. I've worked in some really great systems as an employee. I've also facilitated professional learning and executed really complex strategic plans across systems that weren't as functional as they needed to be in order for me to work to my fullest potential or serve others as well as I want to either. It's been in those situations that I found pedagogical documentation to be most personally rewarding to me. And this is what I want for all of you. Documentation has enabled me a sense of presence, the ability to notice not only what's working, but how different answers and solutions are presenting themselves in ways that I wouldn't have expected if I wasn't documenting my learning and reflecting on it with really clear intention. In this way, documentation has become something of a lifeboat, a light, and a ladder to me during times of great confusion and even when I'm feeling pretty demoralized and burned out. This is really why I wrote my book, and it's what I want for all of you, is to sort of live your lives, personal or professional, in full color, rather than suffering a sepia-toned existence. And so let's dive in and learn a little bit more about what that might look like for all of you. While we might be tempted to start with specific concepts, content, skills, problems, or opportunities, I'm going to invite you to pause the recording here, zoom in on some of these questions, and take some time to sit with them. Maybe go for a walk and carry them with you. Pull out your journal. Have a conversation with a friend or a trusted colleague. These are some of the questions that have helped me create a powerful vision for the work that I want to do and the difference that I want to make, both personally and professionally, no matter what my circumstances are, where I'm working, who I'm serving, or who I might be working for. This has been a really important sort of shift in my own perspective about my life and who I am as an educator. No matter who I work for, who I work with, or what my circumstances are, it's been my answers to these questions that have served as a real good guide for me. They've helped me sort of remain aligned to my true north. And so I hope that if you can take some time to sit with them now, they'll do the same for you. Once you have a bit more clarity there, you'll probably be ready to think about the different postures that documentarians assume. When you're really clear about your vision, you can get also clear about what you're trying to accomplish, whether it's trying to learn something, trying to better understand someone, or even a place, a culture, an environment. Maybe you're trying to produce some sort of product. Regardless of what your overall goal is, ask yourself if it lives in alignment with your vision, and then consider how you might make that learning process visible, not just the product or the outcome, but how would you actually make the process that you're going through as a learner a bit more visible. If you're trying to improve something within your system, what are you learning about along the way? And how might you slow the doing down long enough to document the process? Where could you make some key observations? And how might you document that learning? I'm going to leave you some good ideas and really tangible strategies today. What would interpreting that evidence look like? And whose perspective could help you interpret it better and make better plans moving forward? These are the different postures that documentarians assume. And I'm going to invite you to do the same throughout our time together. I'm also wanting to leave you with some very specific ways to go about doing that. If you're a beginner, these are some really simple ways to begin. You might document the unexpected, things that happen that are kind of surprising in the context that you're trying to learn within. You might document frustration or shifts in your own thinking or mood or behavior. You might document silliness or sparks of recognition, innovation, meaning making. You might document courage or even joy. These are very simple ways to begin, and they serve as filters. What we know about learning is it's a really complex experience. There are a million different moving pieces inside of it. There are a million different discoveries to be made, and they all seem to be unfolding at the same time if you're really paying attention. When you are very clear about your purposes for documentation, you bring those purposes into sharp relief and you start to notice them a bit better. It can also help you filter all of the other noise out of the experience so that you can be really attuned to what you're hoping to document for. There are different modes that you might move in and out of as a documentarian. You might decide that you're going to do a little bit of journaling, perhaps. You might make learning visible and then reflect on it with written words. There are appropriate tools that might help you with this. You might decide as well that you're going to document by taking pictures or doodling or sketching or mocking something up as a visual design and then capturing it with your camera. You might blog. You might take to social media and, for instance, dedicate your Instagram to this for the entire summer. You might instead make your learning visible by talking about it, even by yourself, to yourself, and audio recording those conversations. You might find yourself in a situation where you can speak about it with others. Your learning might involve performance as well. Perhaps you plan to build something, make something. Perhaps you're performing something. If your goals are particularly health-oriented, for instance, maybe you're trying to improve a particular physical fitness skill. Maybe you're trying to sharpen a sports-related skill. And in those cases, that physical sort of mode of expression requires you to use video. Oftentimes, people find that documenting their learning is a richly multimodal experience. And so these are the modes and related tools that you might find very useful, and you might pause your learning here to make good choices too. The purposes of pedagogical documentation and documentation in general are to share the story of the learning experience. It might happen in a single moment. It might unfold over multiple moments that feel more like a journey that lasts days or weeks or months. It might also become something of an expedition that lasts far beyond our time together or the space of a single month or year. When we document our learning, we often find that we want to tell others about it and they're inspired by it. It might be a teaching opportunity for us. Here we need to be really clear to reflect on what worked and what didn't, and to sit in companionship with the people that we're sharing our learning stories with, rather than shoulding on them and telling them, this is what I learned and this is how you should do it. Consider instead making your learning process visible to them so that they can replicate it and learn things that are important themselves about their own processes. When we share the facts of a learning experience without necessarily offering a really rapid interpretation or opinion about them, we open up opportunities for others to share their perspectives with us. And that can often motivate them to take action in ways that we didn't anticipate. Documentation and pedagogical documentation are richly social constructs and invitations, and it's the social nature of it that improves it and that helps us make better choices and enjoy the experience more as well. You might consider creating specific places to store the data that you gather, things like notebooks or digital photo albums. My Google photo albums are some of my most important sort of documentation tools. I also create documentation panels on foam boards and on walls in schools that I work in, and I did this in my writing studio as well. I'm a huge fan of a tool called Unruler, which I'll speak about in another session. But the fact is, it's important when we're documenting our learning to bring the people that we are learning with or perhaps about into a place where they can see our documentation at eye level. They can peek into our notebooks. They can scroll through the photo albums that we've created. They can explore and even help us build documentation panels. Jessica Vance's work around learning walls is especially inspiring to me, and I hope to be able to deepen your relationship with Jess as well. Consider how you might use tools like these to not only store the evidence that you are gathering, but to be able to reflect on it and manipulate it and share it as well. Journey maps can be very useful tools too. For instance, when I think about the journey of a 9-week professional learning experience, the sticky notes kind of demonstrate to all of you who are watching very specific dedicated moments within that 9-week professional learning experience where I am planning to pause and do some documentation work. The yellow torn scraps of paper are reminders to me about how I might position myself and behave like a documentarian and a highly reflective teacher as well. You might pause your learning here with me long enough to sketch up a journey map of your own and share it with others who might give you some great feedback on it. Inside of our documentation process, there are all sorts of different times, moments, and opportunities to invite other people to share how they're interpreting what we're noticing and the data that we're collecting. These are some ideas for how you might involve other people in your own documentation experience before you begin documenting your learning, as you begin documenting your learning, or in the end when you begin interpreting your data. Documentation and pedagogical documentation are often full of many false starts. I can't tell you how many times I begin an intentional project only to find that my purposes are changed by those first attempts, and I go back to the beginning to start all over again. That's why early in our conversation today, I explained that I don't necessarily see documentation as a process in as much as a set of postures that I move in and out of. And when I invite diverse perspectives inside of each of those different moments, even if an intentional project isn't one that I quote unquote finish, the fact that I've worked each part of the process in such a thoughtful manner and invited other people to collaborate with me around it makes it richly rewarding and sometimes surfaces questions that are far more meaningful to me than the fast sort of establishment of answers. One of the things that I'm leaving all of you with at the end of this session is my digital documentation notebook. If you'd like to see examples of what really sophisticated and even more simple projects look like, this might offer you great inspiration. You'll also find links within that notebook to very specific protocols I've used in each of those contexts to engage in either pedagogical or deeply personal documentation of learning. I hope that you'll reach out so that we can talk about where you are in your own thinking and work around all of this. I look forward to having those conversations with you and discussing them more. I also hope that you'll have a peek at the next module of learning. It's going to be about noticing when learning is happening so that you are actually documenting really powerful moments. If you would like more support around what it looks like to actually capture evidence of learning in the moment, and you need some really tangible structures for that, this will be the module for you. See you there.